Welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I look forward to hearing everything that you have to tell us about yourself and Operation Freedom Paws. I'd like to start just at the very beginning, really, about your working with dogs when you were in the Army, just to give some background about what you were doing there and how you worked with them.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me and the ability to present Operation Freedom Paws and what we do. So my background is I spent 9 years in the Army on active duty and 6 in reserves. And I learned to handle a military police canine and became a military police canine instructor, which is what I did for the majority of my career. So I've trained dogs from sentry work to patrol to narcotics, explosive detection, contraband, search and rescue. And even after I got out, I continued to train dogs for family, friends, for myself to do wilderness search and rescue. So I think I've been doing dog training in some way, shape, or form for over 45 years now. And that's led me to that, plus my other life experience has led me to where I am today.
That's fantastic. The question I have about the difference between the dog that you used in the Army, for instance, for that training, versus the dogs that you were using now. Were they specially bred dogs while you were in the Army that were for those missions, or?
No, I served from 75 to 84, and there was the tail end of a research program that the military was doing, but they weren't breeding. And it's interesting because my experience with looking for dogs and going out what we would call buy trips, where the military would go out into communities and, put up advertisements or go to they were called pounds back then, but the shelters. Right. And says, Uncle Sam wants your dog, kind of thing. And the characteristics that we were looking for depended on if we were looking for a dual purpose dog, meaning a patrol and either narcotic or patrol and explosive, or a single purpose dog to just do the scent work of the narcotics and the explosives. So there was evaluations and would they be a good fit, kind of thing. With that being said, I took a lot of that experience and transferred it over, because what you look for in a patrol dog is not anything that you want to look for in a service dog.
Can you talk about the difference of what
Sure.
you look for?
Yeah. So what I like to use is an analogy where we can talk about the different types of dogs, right? So you have a working dog, and in the case of the military, we would call them MWDs, military working dogs. In the case of civilian, they're, police canines. They're referred to as canines. And if it is a apprehension or a patrol dog, what you're looking for is their willingness to bite, their willingness to hang on to the person that you're trying to apprehend. And that's an outward focus. It's teamwork with the handler, but that willingness to go and apprehend and to control so that you can get control of the suspect. With regards to the scent work, whether it's narcotics, explosive, contraband, or search and rescue, you're looking for them to have a great nose and to be able to distinguish real scent, false scent, and not give false alerts, and be able to trust that and rely on it. So again, they're kind of outward focused. So that's the working dog side of things, right? In our everyday life, folks that have pets, they're companions, right? They might provide comfort. That pet may or may not have training, and they can pay attention to other animals and other people. You can have a pet become an ESA if a therapist or a doctor says that you have the need for an emotional support animal. Now, for an emotional support animal, the only thing by law that it's covered with is HUD laws, housing laws. And what that basically means is that a person cannot be denied housing because they have an emotional support animal. And you notice I said animal. because it's not necessarily just a dog. It could be a
Right.
cat. It could be a bird. It's something that's providing that emotional stability for the individual. But that dog or the cat or bird doesn't have the right to go everywhere with that person. So again, it's
I
only
see.
covered by housing law. It also means that they can't be charged necessarily a pet deposit, because the housing law says you can't be denied or be charged for, and each state is different on their laws regarding that. So again, they can be outward focused.
Mhm.
Now we get into therapy dogs, and therapy dogs also are outward focused, and they're highly trained so that they can go out and provide comfort and therapy to individuals, whether it's in a nursing home or helping a child read or going to hospitals, being used in therapy sessions by therapists. So again, outward focused. Now we get into the service dog world, and the service dog is highly, highly trained, and it's trained for specific tasks to provide medical assistance to the individual, and it's inward focused. And what do I mean by that? It has to focus on that one person, that handler, the person that it's trying to take care of. Now, it's afforded rights under the American with Disabilities Act. And what that says is that as long as the dog meets the criteria and the standards set forth by the ADA, that it has training, that it provides a medical assistance, then it can be afforded the right to accompany the individual into public places. Any place that the public can go, that dog can go. The dog can't go into sterile environments, kitchens,
Right.
places the public would not go. Okay. But
Okay.
again, it's inward focused, and it needs to be so that it can take care of the individual and what their medical needs are, whether they are physical, biological, psychological, it doesn't matter. As long as the dog is performing tasks, because the ADA also states that you can be asked two questions when entering a public place, and one is the dog trained to be a service dog, and what tasks does the dog perform for you? They can't ask you what's wrong with you, what's your medical condition, right?
Mhm.
But people don't always know that. There's a lack of education. So they may ask, what's wrong with you? Why do you need a dog, right? And it can
Right.
come across really abrasive, which for our veterans can be a trigger.
Yes.
And so, you know, they have to be prepared to be able to answer that in a calm manner and to help educate, because not everyone knows. The ADA covers the individual, saying they have the right to take the dog in. But if the dog misbehaves, acts out, urinates, defecates in any public place, they can be asked to leave, right?
Right.
And they can leave, give their dog to somebody, put their dog away, and go back in. Because again, the right is afforded to the individual, not the dog.
Right. One thing I did not know, but I learned, was that an individual should not pet a service dog because they're working. And I didn't know that. And often I have seen on dogs, they will have a notice that says, "Please do not pet me. I'm working." And
Mhm.
so that was something that I didn't realize, and that's often. I would think that that would be something that a veteran would confront. Would be people wanting to come up and meet the
Yeah,
veteran and also touch the dog. So
yeah,
they really are working.
they are. And to give a little bit more to that,
Mhm.
when a person, we talked about that inward focus, right? Being focused
Right.
on that one individual. So for everyone that wants to go up and pet, or does the drive-by pet, or
Mhm.
makes kissy noises, barky noises, what they're actually doing is distracting the dog from doing its job.
Right.
Now let's combine that with our veterans that have a service dog, especially our clients. You've got a combination of things, right? First off, they're just getting back out into the world. They've been isolated. They have triggers, and that dog is helping them to move through life, move through that store, whatever it is, and get them out and back into being part of society and engage. And what happens when a person comes by and, says, "Can I pet your dog?" is 9 times out of 10, it's like, "I don't want to talk to you. I want my spatial bubble. Leave me alone. I just want to get done what I want to get done." But the dog is a bridge. And depending on how the client is taught to utilize that dog, it can be a bridge for a lot of different things. The very first is to be able to communicate again instead of
Mhm.
isolating and shutting down, and to actually engage with a conversation with a non-veteran, right, who's out
Right.
in the public, who does not understand, and that communication can help educate them. They can say yes or no, right, to being able to say hi to the dog. For
Right.
our program, we teach our clients how to be able to say no, not feel badly about it, by simply saying, "Not today. I really need my dog to focus on me, but thank you for asking." Or,
Right.
"Yes, but let me instruct you on how to greet my dog, and I appreciate you asking." Right?
That's
So they're
wonderful.
acknowledging that it was asked versus just the drive-by pet. Okay.
Right.
And so we're empowering them to get their voices back. And then there's a whole process by which they walk that person through the proper way to greet a dog. And it begins a conversation. And it helps to educate about how it could be distracting, right? So it's really frustrating because in society right now, you know, people a lot of people like dogs, right? And they
Yeah,
see it
right.
out and they make comments, "Oh, what a cute dog. Can I say
Right.
hi?" Or
Right.
as they're saying it, they reach in.
Right.
And that just that movement in towards the dog is a violation of the veteran's space, because we all have spatial bubbles and we don't realize it. And for some people, that spatial bubble is very tiny. For others, it is large. And
Right.
so the dog can actually, one of the tasks the dog can do for our veteran clients is to create that safe spatial bubble while allowing somebody to come into it a little bit closer by different positionings and commands that we use, which allows
Mhm.
them to realize the outside world and the non-veteran is not a threat.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, because I think a lot of people don't understand. So I really appreciate that. And also, I believe that I read that you have civilians that come in as part of your training. Is that correct? Like in the beginning part of the training, you have civilians as part of the work with the dog and the veteran?
Absolutely. So our program is a little bit different in that we're not having a trainer train the dog and then
Yes.
matching it with the client, putting them through a 2 or a 4 week boot camp. Here's the 80 to 120 commands that you're going to need. Now go off. We'll touch base with you in a month, 3 months, 6 months, and so on. Our
Hmm.
program is actually 48 weeks long. And we pull our dogs out of shelters and rescue groups. Our dogs go through a 30-step evaluation because not every dog can be a service dog.
Can
Um,
you explain that a little bit, like what you're looking for in this evaluation for the dogs? The specific.
right. So some things that I can share is, one, the dog has to be willing to and wanting to engage with a human,
Okay.
not to be so aloof, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the dog has to be wanting that human touch, so that the interaction and the canine human bond is connected. Because
Okay.
it's in our world, our tagline is 4 paws, 2 feet, one team, and they really
That's
need to
wonderful.
function as one team. And what
Mm-hmm.
we look at the service dog being is a lifeline. It's an extension of the individual to be able to create what we call a new normal and
Mm-hmm.
begin the healing process. So when we match the dog, we've interviewed the client already, and we kind of have a sense for their personality, what their needs are. We have open, honest conversations. Is the individual willing to do the hard work? Because the dog is the easy part. We're going to
And
work on
they need excuse me, they also need to have a prescription. Is this right? For a doctor needs to say that this is medically necessary. So there's usually some kind of diagnosis that you're aware of going into
Yes,
this?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It must be a prescription or a letter that's equivalent to a prescription
Mhm.
signed by an MD. So either a psychiatrist or a medical doctor. A
It
therapist,
doesn't have to be the VA. It can be
it
any.
can any,
Is that
right?
correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of our veterans are frustrated with the Veterans Administration system, and
Yes.
and so they will go outside if they can, or if they're not within an immediate area where a VA is close, they will
Hmm.
use. It used to, I forget what they changed it to, but there's a program specific to them being able to go to outside services because they're not within a certain radius of the VA services.
Right. Great.
So
So they're not limited. They can get this prescription
right.
from a doctor. That's great. Okay.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
again, either
No.
a psychiatrist or a
Right.
medical MD. It must have MD. A
Okay.
psychologist can't write prescriptions. And
Okay.
here's the thing. A prescription for a service dog is no different than prescription for medication, a wheelchair, prosthetic, whatever it is. It is a
Mhm.
prescription. It says it is medically required.
Right.
Okay. So when we know that and we've
Okay.
interviewed and we get to know our clients, we've already been picking our dogs and have them to pull from so we know the dog's personality, or we may go on a specific hunt to find a specific dog. Okay.
Mhm.
And just like people, dogs have unique personalities and skill sets, just like every person. So we treat them
Right.
both individually. We have a
Mhm.
saying at Operation Freedom Paws, you don't get the dog you want, you get the dog you need. And the reason we say that is 9 out of 10 of our veteran clients want a dog for protection.
Mm.
Service dogs are not protection dogs. So when we were
Right.
talking earlier, right, and we were talking about
Yes.
the apprehension and stuff, we don't want
Mhm.
that in any way, shape, or form because our dogs
Right.
need to be able to handle the stresses of the world, not be
Mhm.
reactive, to
Right.
ignore other animals and other people unless given a command that they can visit, focus on that individual. So when we match them together, it's the needs. Is this dog capable of taking care of the individual's medical needs? And when our clients
Mhm.
come to us, it's not just post-traumatic stress, it's not just military
Right.
sexual trauma. We have it, they have multiple things.
Right.
9 out of 10 of our clients have either post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, which also is tied to post-traumatic stress,
Right.
but then they could have mobility issues, pain management, diabetes.
Mhm.
In some cases, we have clients, because we don't discriminate with what branch of the service or what era. So we have
Okay.
clients from all the branches, all 5, including coasties, as well as all the way back to Vietnam.
Wow.
And through current conflicts, plus conflicts that people don't even know about, right? Trauma is trauma. It changes the brain.
Really.
So to bring that back into the dog and what them matching, they then go into a program for us where it's 48 weeks minimal, because we also
Mhm.
go at the pace of our clients, right? Some and
Right.
traumatic brain injury, right? It's another one that our clients come to us with. So they could have a
Mhm.
traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. And so might take a little bit longer. But during that time, we're training our clients to train the dog for their specific needs. Because
Right.
remember, I mentioned everyone is an individual, right? There's
Yes.
no one size fits all, no cookie cutter approach to what we do. There's a basic
Right.
foundation that they all get, but then it's
Mhm.
tailored to their specific medical needs. And
Yes.
to, so we include the family. We want family involvement because that's the very first thing that we usually see, is that some of our clients are on the verge of divorce, their relationships
Right.
with children, and so by them learning to communicate with the dog, they also opens the door for communication to the family and friends in the outside world. So including the family with what we do is important. We have a therapist at every
Wonderful.
training session and a therapist available outside of, because appointments at the VA aren't on a regular basis all the time. They're hard to get.
Right.
Life
Yes.
happens. So we want to be able to deal with in the moment when it's happening to help them work through it. We operate 24 hours a day at our kennel, so there's always somebody to answer the phone and to get a hold of one of us to help with that. And then we do family outings, family dog camps. We can't do them right now with COVID,
Right.
but we try and show them they can get back out and live life and do some of the things that they used to enjoy doing. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that part of it. Now to tie
Mm-hmm.
that back in, because we don't add in when we have a group of 6 or a group of 10, we add when we have the funds because we don't charge for anything that we do. And it costs us about $17,000 per dog team. So we rely on grants, donations, events, which we can't have right now. We're trying to move to the virtual world. And then some kennel income, because having a kennel to offset the administrative side of things of having kennel techs, we opened up a part of it for daycare and boarding for the public. Now,
Oh.
that
Oh.
ties it back into what we were talking about
Oh, I.
non-veterans. And I'm using
Mhm.
non-veteran for a reason, because for some of our clients, the word civilian can also be a trigger. We are all
Interesting.
civilians. We are all
True.
civilians, right?
True. Yes.
And just because we got out of the service doesn't mean that we're not a civilian any more than it meant while we were in, we weren't a civilian. It's the
Right.
interpretation of the word, because we are all civilians of the United States.
Thank you for that. That's really important.
So by saying non-veteran, it just is
Yes.
referring to someone who has not served or is not serving.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Um, and so our non-veteran customers or our non-veteran clients, because 80% of what we do is with veterans, the other 20% is made up in this order: children with disabilities and adults with disabilities.
Mhm.
So by bringing them all together, it's helping our veteran clients realize that they're not alone, that
Right.
yes, their disability might be unique to them, but there are other folks with disabilities as well that are going through similar struggles. But then, because just like we have our kennel for the public, when we call those our customers, and they come and go through the kennel while we're having training and things like that, they realize that the non-veteran is not a threat, and that it's okay to have them around. So therefore,
Right.
in what we've seen is that helps them when they go to the grocery store or go to a movie theater, right? That the folks
Yeah.
around aren't necessarily a threat. So then we bring them,
Mhm.
we offer public dog training for the obedience, because everything we do is based off of the foundation of obedience and being
Right.
able to recognize intelligent or obedient disobedience. And so by having the non-veteran participating in the training up to a certain point, they begin to build other relationships. And so it helps the veteran, but it's also helping to educate the non-veteran about the struggles that our veterans are facing as they transition or have transitioned into the non-veteran life.
That's so important. Can you speak about that some, because that is just critical, because I do think that non-veterans really don't know what to say, and when they say thank you for your service, that's really not sufficient. There's a big disconnect, and that's part of what we're trying to do with the Veteran Summit, is to connect together so that non-veterans understand a lot of what they're going through. Particularly, one thing that you had mentioned was moral injury, which is something that I'd love for you to talk some about. We've covered that a lot in the summit, and I would like to understand how you perceive that um, with the work that you're doing with veterans.
Well, I'm going to talk for a moment from my own personal experience.
Okay.
So I was in an era when I joined when there was a thing called the Women's Army Corps.
Right.
Okay. And I got into basic training, got through the 12 weeks of basic training, and right at the end of the basic training, as I'm ready to go off to military police school, the Army decided, okay, we're doing away with the Women's Army Corps, and it became the Army. So it was the blending of the Women's Army Corps and the Army together. And there was a lot of resistance to that with regards to the men and terminology and women's roles and all of that. So, and I went in right out of high school. So my military experience is probably part of my foundation for how I view the world today. My world is still black and white. And I'm mentioning that because when you go in, you have, you know, one of the questions they ask you is your religious preference. Okay. And, you know, so you either have one or you don't, and it's written on your dog tags. And that's the beginning piece of, I think, where moral injury can enter. Because depending upon the veteran's experience or active duty member's experience within the military, they have a set core of values that they come in with their belief systems, their integrity, their values, all of that stuff. And as you progress, depending on your experience, and I'm saying experience and not combat or theater for a reason, because trauma is trauma. It can happen anywhere. Okay.
Right. Absolutely.
That can taint your belief faith system. And as you see more and more stuff, as you experience more and more stuff, there becomes this gap. And in my opinion, in my interpretation of moral injury, the more that we cause harm to that system, which is part of our foundation of who and what we are, the more damage that can be done, and that moral injury can then compound any physical or psychological injury or biological injury that comes along with it. Because again, in my opinion, I think as a human being, no matter how you're raised, we all want to have faith. We all want to have faith in something greater than us. And so when injury occurs to that faith, which is what, in my opinion, the moral injury is, then you start to doubt other things and the foundation begins to crumble. And then it becomes compounded based on, again, in my opinion, having a layman's knowledge of Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, and that basic foundation, which, you know, if you look at the pyramid on the bottom rung of that pyramid is all of your basic needs. And oh, by the way, that's what the military provides, right? It provides your food, your shelter, your housing, your medical, right? So you're not worrying about any of those things. And so when you transition out, that rung is gone. And now you're lost. And the military does not teach you how to take military acronyms or your military skill set and translate that into non-veteran or civilian life, right? So that you can go get that job. And how does it equate? How do I speak non-veteran language? How do I make my world gray when my world has been black and white? And so all of it together, right? And if you come out, and I went out, I didn't have a disability. I've had experience that have had a profound impact on my life. Right. But that transition was still hard for me. It took me 2 years to figure out who and what I was going to be, how I wanted to live, and to make that transition. And that's without any disability. So now you throw in a disability, it's even more compounded, right? And the feeling that you're worthless. And self-worth is important. And self-worth, in my opinion, is not only tied to the pyramid, but it's tied to the moral side of things, because our belief system in ourself and in our faith. And so there's this hodgepodge. And in society today, we don't do a really good job about talking about moral injury. And veterans are not the only ones who face moral injury. Our first responders face moral injury every day. not just about taking a life. It's about what we witness and the horrors that we
Yes.
see, right?
Right now in the hospitals with COVID,
Yeah. And
it's just,
so,
they're right on the front line. Yeah.
and then tie into that the black and white world and not knowing how to navigate the gray, right? And I call that the easy speak, right? Because
Right.
at least in my experience, a veteran will say what they're going to say, and it may be blunt, it may be direct, right? There may be tones associated with it, where in the non-veteran world, those can all be misinterpreted, right?
Right.
And so navigating that can be really fuzzy. And that's one way a service dog, can actually help navigate and figure that out by
Mhm.
being able to have conversations.
One of the things I wanted to bring up as you're talking about trauma, which is, of course, my foundation is trauma sensitive awareness. And that's the main focus, is to understand and be aware of those people that are suffering from trauma. And it does come in many forms. For a veteran, it seems to me we are now aware of adverse childhood experiences. They're called ACEs. And a veteran can go into service because they are trying to escape trauma in their
Yeah.
own personal lives. So they may have been, and this is something I'm very interested in, they may have been very traumatized prior to going into service. So service would the black and white would feel safe, just as you're saying, with their needs are met in a way that they weren't being met prior to that. They may have been injured physically, morally, psychologically prior to going into the service. Compounding that moral injury, psychological injury, with what they experience in combat, with what they've seen, a dog is taking on multiple, literally complex post-traumatic stress in the individual, multiple layers of trauma. How does the dog respond to the triggers? I saw a YouTube of you with your dog, and your dog was responding to you, and you were saying, she or he, I'm not sure which, is saying that I'm feeling anxious. How does the dog know this psychological component, the emotional component, the trigger that is happening in the body that someone else might not see, but the dog
So,
know?
yeah, so let me try and break this into pieces.
Okay.
So we are a sum of our experiences.
Right.
So to your point, yes, you can have trauma and you can have complex trauma, where it's a combination of a lot of different traumas, right? But the dog doesn't care.
Right.
It really doesn't. It doesn't care about how many times you've been traumatized, what those traumas were, right?
Mm-hmm.
A dog's not asking you to tell your story over and over again. It's listening, right? You can tell it anything you want to tell it, and it's going to hold your deepest, darkest secret.
Yeah.
It's not going to tell anybody.
Yeah.
So dogs are an amazing gift to us. And what we do here at Operation Freedom Paws is look at it differently than a lot of other organizations. And there are some great organizations out there. And I want to stress that, because Operation Freedom Paws is not for every veteran, right? And we are located out here in California. We have
Mm-hmm.
limited resources. Yes, we do serve clients throughout California, Oregon, Washington. We have clients in New York, Texas, but special arrangements have been made to bring them here to go through our program. We don't receive any government funding outside, okay?
Okay.
So what we do that's different, that makes us unique, is I'm pulling on my experience, and our program pulls on my experience from scent work, from narcotics, from explosive, from contraband, from SAR and rescue,
Mm-hmm.
or search and rescue. SAR is the acronym. And 60% of a dog's brain is dedicated to the sense of smell. If you ever look at a dog's nose and really look at it, you see the nostrils and you see the slits on the side, okay? The dog is taking and breathing in and out at the same time, and we don't realize it. Every single dog will do something we call read P-mail. That means when they want to go potty, they're going to sniff, put their nose down. But you'll notice when they're doing that, their mouths are closed. So as humans, we do a disservice. Dogs communicate with body language. That's how they communicate to each other. It's, yeah, they might bark, and certain barks mean certain things, but before it ever gets to the bark, the dog has communicated with body language. And most people don't know how to read that body language. And so a common mistake, and an example that I use to try and explain this, when people see a dog and go up to pet it, doesn't matter if it's a puppy, a small dog, or a large dog, they bend over to pet the dog. Well, when you do that in the dog's world, and you're doing a play bow, if you ever watch two dogs play, their front legs go down and they bow, right? So if they had a waist, it would be bending the waist. So here you are as a human being, right? And you're bending over to pet them, and you're saying, come into my space and play with me, without knowing it, which is why most people get jumped on.
How fascinating, yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, and I'm saying that for a reason, because when we train, we pay attention to body language, but here's the key, that 60% of the brain, how the dog smells, right? The body language, recognizing that the dog is actually scenting because the mouth is closed while walking. It's not just closed when sniffing P-mail, okay? Concentrating with nose games to get them to truly use their nose, because we're made up of a whole lot of stuff.
Right.
And the easiest way to get people to understand it, right, is diabetes, high and low blood sugars. So we have certain exercises that we do so that the dog knows your unique scent. And every single person has a unique scent. You are dropping tens of thousands of skin cells everywhere you go and leaving your scent behind, and you don't even realize it, right?
Right.
So by the dog being close, by being affectionate, you being able to cuddle, and the dog is going to know your scent. Okay, you can try and hide it with the shampoos and the soaps and the deodorants and the colognes and the perfumes, all you want. They are going to get through all of that and know your scent. If the dog is trained, has the ability to use their nose, has the desire to use their nose, and wants to please and wants to do the work. Okay, so when your blood sugar is at its normal, dog's not going to do anything, okay? But if your blood sugar should go high and the dog has been trained, this is when it starts to do this, let me know, right? Then it's going to alert you, which means you need to take corrective action. Same thing if it drops low, it's going to take corrective action before it becomes a crisis. Let's say you're sleeping and you have diabetes and your blood sugar is dropping, the dog's trying to wake you up because that's one of the tasks it's been taught to do, right? And it can't wake you up. You have a family member, that dog's going to go get that family member and get help. So it's based on your chemistry, number one. Number two, we are also made up of energy. Dogs are extremely sensitive to energy. So think about how some dogs respond to thunderstorms. Right?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
The electrical storm without the rain, right?
Right.
The sounds, but it's not just sound, it's a combination of energy in the world that's coming from that storm. Or some folks, and it's been proven, living in California, earthquakes, right? We get little tremors all the time that don't amount to anything, but the dog might act strange. And why? Because it felt the vibrations. It felt the energy.
Yeah.
Okay? So in our world and in Operation Freedom Pause, we're paying attention to our energy, and the dog is paying attention to our energy, but it's also paying attention to the chemistry. And another way dogs about energy, if you've ever had a pet and you've gotten in a tiff with a spouse or
Right.
a family member,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Your energy in that moment is very agitated, very angry. How many
Right.
times does the dog go away and want no part of it, or step in because you need to separate?
Right. Yeah.
So it's a combination, right, of all of that, but specifically that chemistry and knowing that
Mhm.
individual's chemistry. And another example is pain management. We always ask,
Right.
on a scale of 1 to 10, where is your pain level? What is a normal, right? If one of our veteran clients lives at a constant 4 of pain, then the dog is going to alert when it gets to a 5 or 6 and say, sit down, take a break, stop pushing through, because let me tell you, these veterans are stubborn. They want a soldier on,
Right.
Marine on, whatever it is, push through it, right? And the dog says, oh, no, you're not. And getting them to recognize that and take the action and acknowledge the alert is the hardest part of what we do every day.
Wow. Amazing. How do you handle that when the dog is in a family and you've got young kids that are running around and they are trained for that, for their person, for their veteran, but how do they sort of rule out all of the interference that comes when they go out in the public? How do you get the dog to focus so specifically and not be distracted?
That's part of the training, is getting the dog
Yeah.
to really pay attention to that one person and ignore the external stimuli, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with training.
Wow.
But to specifically address the family, so
Mm-hmm.
dogs are also a pack animal. And so they become familial with that pack. And so the family is their pack. Now they
I see.
know their role to take care of this person. Okay. But dogs are also empathetic. If they have all of the traits that we look for a service dog, they're empathetic. So if another
Mhm.
family member isn't feeling well or is having a bad day, they're going to want to
Right.
take care of as well, right?
Yeah.
By alerting their handler that something is going on,
I see.
right? And
Interesting.
then
Yeah.
and so we allow interaction with the family members, but it's limited because the expression lose it or use it or lose it comes
Hmm.
into play. If you're not using your dog and you're treating it like a pet, all the training that we've done goes out the window. It does not matter,
Yeah. Interesting.
because
Yeah.
the bottom line is you're either going to be the leader and be that key in the team, or if you're not, the dog is going to take over. And the
Hmm.
dog is going to revert back to its natural behavioral instincts, because dogs react one of two ways: out of instinct and how they and the training they've had. They never
Right.
react out of emotion.
Interesting.
Doesn't mean they don't have emotions, they just don't react out of it.
Interesting. You shared a story, Mary, about a veteran that had come to you and asked you, could you help him communicate with his daughter because he was working through, I guess, anger issues, maybe addiction issues. And he wanted her to know that the dog would help her not be afraid of him and that the dog would be helpful to her as he was recovering, that he wanted her to know that he was working to recover. Do you remember
Yeah,
the story I'm talking about?
I do. So, and
Yeah,
it's one of numerous.
I'm sure.
So what happens with our veteran clients sometimes is they have a young child, right? And then they get deployed, or something happens when they're on base and the trauma has occurred, and
Right.
they come home and they're different than before they left.
Yeah.
Family members don't understand that, whether it's a child, a spouse, a parent,
Right.
siblings. they don't understand the difference. And
Right.
so for the veteran or the client, they shut down, and they shut down even more. And the more they shut
Yeah.
down, depending on the circumstances, the more angry they get, the more isolating they do. They may self-medicate before they go and get help, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
so that self-medication just compounds, right, the
Right.
situation.
Right.
So in the story that I told you, it's about a veteran who, his daughter was daddy's little girl.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he got deployed, went into theater, and got injured and came home a different person, and was angry. Was angry for a lot of reasons, because here's the other side. If our veterans are in theater and they get sent home because they're injured, they feel like they've never finished the mission. They want to go back.
Mhm.
Depending upon that experience and the event, there's survivor's guilt.
Right.
There's, I should have done more. I want to go
Mhm.
back. I want to finish it. I should have been the
Right.
one that died, right?
Right. Right.
And so they're bringing all of that home, and it doesn't matter, male or female. They're bringing it all home, and they don't know how to deal with it. And
Yeah.
so that anger gets worse and worse. And the nightmares, because in this particular case, the other thing that occurred was having the nightmares and the night tremors and hitting his wife, and not meaning to, because
Right.
he's finally sleeping, right? Because sleep deprivation also comes into this.
Right.
um, and the wife yelling out, the child sees and now becomes frightened, and that's
Right.
not what he wanted. And
Right.
so when he came and he asked, can you help me with this, because we work with the families,
Right.
we had an open, we sat him down together, and we helped guide him to be able to tell her that that's not who he wants to be, and that he doesn't want to hurt her or his spouse or her brother, and that he wants to heal, and that the dog is going to help, but he also needs her help. And so that engagement and explaining how the dog could help, being a bridge, but not putting it in those terms to a child, right?
Mhm.
That if she learns, and by participating in our program, learns to observe the dog, right?
Right.
And how the dog is responding, she's going to know when daddy is having a bad day
Right.
and be able to approach him differently, right?
Mhm.
And so that was the bridge that opened it up, so that they could actually have those honest conversations.
So
And
fantastic.
yeah,
Uh, just really amazing. And I think one of the things that is so spectacular about the dogs is a lot of veterans, that my understanding is they are very resistant to going for treatment and therapy, because they don't, number one, they don't want to repeat everything that's happened to them. Number two, they don't want to take a bunch of drugs. And number three, there's not a feeling of continuity. And the dog is fulfilling all of those. It's continuous support for the veteran without drugs and without having to tell the story. And I think that's just really phenomenal.
well, and I want to address that. So yes, the dog is like having a therapist with you 24 hours a day,
It's incredible. Yeah.
but it's not everything. Okay.
Right.
So,
Right.
and this might sound cruel in what I'm about to say, but it's not meant to be cruel, because the dog is so much more than a tool. But the dog is a tool in your tool belt.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It provides you with the love, the companionship, the assistance that you need. It becomes part of the team. It becomes part of you. You're acting as one, right?
Yes.
But it's only a tool in how you use it. And that's why I use the
Right.
word tool. You have to have a bunch of tools in your tool belt in
Right.
order to get a job done.
Right.
And it can reduce medicines. It can reduce the amount of a certain type of medicine, but it is not the end all be all. It is
Right.
not the single answer. Okay.
Right. Right.
In my world, I say it might be the best medicine of all,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily need to take other medication. And
Right.
definitely stopping the self-medication is an important piece, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to be able to do the hard work. You have to be able to talk to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, to work with the medical doctors, to have a team to support you and
Hmm.
use all of those tools to put it together so that you can take and heal, right? The dog is going
Yes.
to help you on that healing path and start that
Absolutely.
healing path, but it
Right.
takes all of us together. It takes family, it takes community, it takes the medical team. It
Hmm.
takes you doing the hard work on yourself.
Right.
So to address what you said about repeating the story, yeah, they get tired of telling the same story and they get angry
Hmm.
because one, it's usually a non-veteran
Right.
who is asking. Every
Hmm.
time there is a change in that person, whether it's the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the therapist, the social worker, however it's defined, and there's a change, they got to repeat the story over again. And so they
Right.
feel like they're not moving forward,
Hmm.
right? And
Right.
they also feel that that non-veteran doesn't get it,
Right. Yeah.
right? So,
Hmm.
and for here at Operation Freedom Paws, we don't tell war stories. As a matter of fact, war stories are off the table. Do not tell them. We can talk about bouncing quarters off of racks and
Right.
bunk, right? We can
Right.
talk about lousy chow, the coffee being so thick, the spoon, right? Who's got the better food and which branch, you know, things
Right.
like that. Ribbing each other, calling each other zoomy, ground pounders, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Seedies, squids. But we're not gonna bring up that war story, what happened, because people overhear things. And even though you may not be talking to the person standing off 10 feet, if they hear it, it's a
Right.
trigger.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
sometimes in that situation that you're talking about, the the therapist or the psychiatrist or the psychologist refers to a situation without realizing that it's a trigger for that individual, and then they shut down. And so that
Right.
frustration. But the point being is they still need to reach out for help and find that team that works for them. And the other side
Right.
of this, at one point they get so frustrated and they don't want the help, they're not willing to advocate for themselves. And
Right.
that's where spouses, family members, when the veteran gives permission, can help them advocate and reach out. But
Right.
right, it
Right.
doesn't matter veteran, non-veteran. If you're going to ask somebody to advocate for you, you have to give them the right to advocate for yourself until you can learn to advocate for yourself. And that's one of the
Absolutely.
things that Operation Freedom Paw we do, is teach them to advocate for themselves.
Hmm. Well, one of the things that I felt very strongly about doing with the Veterans Summit was to be able to provide alternative treatments, therapies, things that are coming up on the horizon, to talk about moral injury, to really look outside the box and explore things that are beyond the VA. And as you said, there are many tools that you need in the toolbox, and it's not one size fits all. But one of the most important things, which you and I have also discussed ahead of time, was hope. This is the most important thing, is to be able to convey a sense of hope that there are alternative ways. There are things like the dog. There are different therapies, from meditation to somatic healing in the body. There's a lot that can be learned and done without feeling like you have to be restricted and give up. And that's something I would love for you to address sort of in closing. I feel like I could talk to you for about 20 more days, but uh, I know you have a lot to do. But just the concept of hope, because I think that's something that's very important to you, and you're certainly giving it with these incredible dogs and the work that you do. It's just really magnificent, Mary.
So what I believe and how I view hope is, and what we do here at Operation Freedom Paws, is hope stands for something. It's an acronym. If you break it down, hope stands for hang on, pain ends. And the analogy that I like to use is, let's say you got hurt and, the paper cut, right? It hurts like heck in the beginning, and then
Right.
eventually it stops, right? Or you go in for a surgery and it leaves a scar. So before the surgery, you were really hurting. After the surgery,
Mhm.
it wasn't quite so bad. As it heals, the pain starts to go away, but that
Right.
scar is left.
Right.
When you move the wrong way, and I have a scar in my shoulder, okay?
Mhm.
So if I move my arm the wrong way, even though I'm not in pain constant, if I move my arm the wrong way, all of a sudden the pain is there. But here's the thing about
Right.
hope. It ends quicker, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I know that if I hang on, the pain is going to end, right? And so the more we work with that and the more we begin to heal, the
Mhm.
less time is spent in the pain area. And the less time we spend in the pain area, the more we change the brain. And the reason I say
Wonderful.
that is the brain is elastic.
Mhm.
It's the analogy of walking across a wet field, right? And
Right.
you step in that wet field, you leave your footprints. Well, the person who walks behind you across that same thing is going to step in your footprints because they're not going to get as wet. And eventually
Right.
enough people do that and the grass doesn't grow there. And you see that, all you got to do is look around the parking lots
Right.
and there's dead brown spots, right? But here's the great thing about having hope and hanging on, about the pain ending. When you do the hard work, whether the neurological path is changed and it goes around that traumatic brain injury or that trauma, and you
Right.
create new ways of dealing with it,
Right.
then the elasticity of the brain allows for the healing to take place. And the dog
Right.
is helping with that by getting you to focus on the reality here in the moment. Dogs live in the moment, right? They don't care about the past. They don't care
Right.
about the future. They're here in the moment with you. And if you can learn to live in the moment, then the journey forward you can look at as a dance through life. You may take 10 steps forward and 2 steps back, and then begin to take 2 steps forward again. Don't expect to constantly go forward, but if you constantly look behind you, and you never look to the horizon, you will never move forward. And that's what hope is giving you, the ability to look to the horizon. So hang on,
Mhm.
pain will end.
That's just beautiful. Thank you so much, Mary, for spending the time with me and going through all of the specifics of what you do. It's just absolutely amazing. And we will put on our website all the links to Operation Freedom Paws, and hope that we will get donations just flooding in for all the good work that you're doing,
Well,
headed your way.
well, thank you. We appreciate that. We could not survive without our donors and supporters and tuning into our Facebook page, our web page. It really does take a village. I think as we come together and we look at the things that you're trying to bring together for folks, there's a lot of different wonderful treatments,
Mhm.
programs, whether it's diving, whether it's
Right.
equine therapy, animal assisted therapy. There's a bunch of different stuff. And when we put them together and we put those tools in our tool belt and we do it as a collaborative, collective society, then I
Yes.
think that we can help our veterans to realize that their service was truly appreciated and that
Right.
it wasn't a sacrifice that isn't noticed.
Exactly
People
right.
don't, to tie it back to something you said in the beginning, people don't know how to say thank you any
Yes.
other way than thank you for your service.
Right.
And at least they're saying that today. There was a time when they didn't do that. So
That's right.
to my fellow veterans and to military members, if somebody says thank you for your sacrifice, thank you for your service, thank you for writing that blank check, remember, they don't know what you know, and
Right.
they're trying in their own way to say thank you. And thank God they are, because there was a time they didn't.
Right. Right. Well, we want to build the bridge for the non-veteran and the veteran. That's what we're trying to do so that we can understand more what their experience is and take on the responsibility for sending them. That's
Okay.
one of the most important things. So thank you, Mary. And I look forward to speaking with you again and personally supporting Operation Freedom Paws.
Well, thank you. And I wish you the best in the success for this project. And I hope it brings awareness and helps to change the viewpoint of those who do not understand, and educate them as well.
Yes. Thank you so much. And we will be chatting again soon, I hope.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.